All right. Who hasn't got sound? Yes, I didn't want it to be recorded. Okay, welcome to the 536th meeting of the Canterbury Regional Council. As we know, we are still meeting under a pandemic, so we have got some people online, and we don't want people to put messages in the chat. Thank you very much. There'll be one conversation at this meeting, and that's how we'll be working. It's all right to say you can hear, so anybody that said they can hear, that's great, but no other chat in there, please. So we'll open now with a mihi whakatau from Yayan, followed by Liz with a karakia. Thank you, Yayan.
Tēnei te rūru, te kaukau mai nei ki hai mā, hititi ki hai mā, raka raka tūpoka nui o te rūru, te reko. He po, e ao ka awe te ti hei wā mauri ora. Ko te metua tei ki te rukarawa, nō nā te timataka, nō nā te whakamituka, kauri inoa ana hoki, nā na tata katoa, mana ki tiaki i ka wā katoa. Ka uri ai ki a rātou kua hea ki te pō, haere moi mai rā o ki mai. Rātou, ko takahia tara whānui o tāne, I tēnei wiki, I tēnei marama, I tēnei tau, haere, moi mai, oki mai, tiraha, whakatā. Aptino tātou hono rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, nō reira nei te mihi atu, kia koutou kura e ko mai, mo tēnei hui, mo te Councillor Taiao ki Waitaha, ki ngā manuhiri ki te hara mai nei, kia Kim, ki runga te rorihiko nei, I te kapua, ki runga rā, nō reira tēnā koe, kia Jolien ki te hara mai hoki, nei te mihi kia kōrua, I nei rā ki te kōrerenga ngā pahi, nō reira tēnā kōrua. Tātou katoa, ngā kaimahi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Just quickly welcome everyone to our dui today. It's good to have our visitors, talking about our buses. So thank you both for making time to come today. And I'd like to ask Councillor Mackenzie, start with the karakia. Kia ora tātou.
Ko hora te marino te karakia, takina te karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pona mu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Araha asu, araha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. The English approximate translation of that is, may peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone as a pathway for us all this day. Show love and respect for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Right, yes, welcome to Jolien White and from Anglican Advocacy, who will be here this morning to do a submission around a petition in the public transport space. And we're also fortunate to have Kim Fowler online from the President of the Canterbury Student Union Association. And they will be speaking shortly. But first of all, there are apologies from Tumu Taiao, Yvette Couch-Lewis, Councillor Tane Apanui and Councillor Megan Hands. There's no other apologies. Conflicts of interest, they are as they stand. I don't know of any changes. So we'll open up the public forum. I suspect that Jolien's here now. If Jolien would like to come in, welcome Jolien. Have a seat. What are we doing about the mask? Are we are all putting our masks on? I forgot one. No, I've got one. Here's a new one. That's all right. Thank you. You're very good. Unfortunately, Jolien, you've come through the pandemic, so we have to wear these masks. So we're sorry about that, but we're trying to do our very best to comply with all the rules around it, which I'm sure is probably the best thing we could be doing as a society. So welcome to our meeting, and over to you. You have 10 minutes to present. We have a little bell at 9 minutes, and so that'll give you a bit of a warning, and then some councillors might have some questions. So over to you. Thank you very much for coming along.
Right, how's that? Have I got the right slide? Grand. Or Jolly Mai Takawanwa, or Kahotu, or Anglican Advocacy in Christchurch. We're down on Fitzgerald. By way of introduction, I'd like to mention a few other organisations that are adding their voice to what we're presenting on today. There's a number of climate change groups, Gen0350.org, some disability groups like Hohepa. There's community groups like the New Brighton Project and the Time Bank, student unions, normal unions like the PSA, social service agencies like the City Mission have added their voice to our call. They are not focused quite so much on climate change, but with an eye to the vulnerable and transport equity. So there's quite a broad base of organisations that are involved in what we're talking about today that see a need not just for small changes, but for significant shifts in our transport sector. And I know that's something that you're very concerned about as well. And I believe there's a public consultation coming out on it soon. There's over 50 organisations that have joined our call and formed the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity. As you know, I'm sure, our call is to ask central government, as part of their emissions reduction plan, to fund free public transport for three groups: community service card holders, students, and under 25s. And we would love for you to add your name alongside others in this cause, which would simply mean having your name and logo included in our submissions and the work that we're doing on this subject. In Christchurch, transport makes up 54% of our greenhouse emissions. We've got the highest car ownership rates and lowest public transport funding per head of population for the three main cities. And we're not silly enough to think that it's a simple math problem. We're not here saying that we think that you increase funding for public transport by X and get a corresponding decrease in emissions by X. It's never quite that simple when you're talking about human behaviour. Human behaviour is always complex, and you change one part of it, and all sorts of other bits of the system may well change or even snowball, which is why part of our ask is to fund public transport for under 25s. Because that's about establishing familiarity and patterns of behaviour and about destigmatising public transport for a generation of people. And the potential payoffs for that could be city changing. One thing that's certain, we can't keep doing what we're doing. Business as usual is not going to work, and we need to be bold and creative if we're going to halve our emissions by 2030. The main thing I wanted to say today was that there was some concern amongst councillors in other cities that if they support this campaign, then it would look like they were preempting their own public transport consultations, where free fares was one of their options. And I'm not entirely convinced this is the case. Obviously, you know the priorities that you have to juggle, and there's all sorts of pressures on you around this. But a territorial consultation about projects funded locally seemed to be quite different to our campaign looking for central funding as part of funding that will be allocated anyway to the emissions reduction plan. It doesn't feel super preemptive to me to support free fares in a nationally funded project and then support a different option if it's a locally funded project. I know we all work within budget constraints and have multiple priorities, but it doesn't feel particularly preemptive to me. And because of that, a number of councils have already supported this call. Porirua, Wellington, Kapiti Coast, Dunedin, Manawatu and Palmerston North have all signed on to this campaign or put their logos alongside the other organisations. And the Greater Regional Council in Wellington has added in their submission to the emissions reduction plan that they would like support for this plan, but they haven't quite added their name to the campaign, if that makes sense. But in their own submissions, they've said they would like the government to consider supporting what we're asking for. Also, I'm not sure if this figure is entirely correct, but I think only 246 million was allocated to Otatahi in the National Land Transport Plan compared to 1.2 billion in Wellington and 2.8 billion in Auckland. So it seems like supporting this free fares campaign would be kind of an equitable stance anyway. So what we're really asking, because I know there's no motion on the table, there isn't an agenda item about this today. What we're really asking, on the basis of what we've been talking about, and on the strength of the number of organisations, both locally and nationally, that you would be willing to put a motion forward for the next council meeting to support this call with your name, and have that as a as an open conversation. So thank you very much for listening to us. I know this is a subject you already know a lot about and have a lot of things going on, but the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity would like you to consider joining what we're doing as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jolien. We've got some questions now.
Yeah, kia ora. Thanks, Jolien. I just wanted, perhaps it got lost in translation. We do actually have our emissions reduction plan submission on the agenda today for our public meeting. We've just got a day extension, which is why we're sort of making it official now. So my question is about what type of things you've been asking to see in other people's submissions. You've obviously mentioned Greater Wellington Regional Council. Was it simply a mention of the campaign, or what would you like to?
The way, I mean, obviously what I would like to see is the council, is ECAN officially supporting this campaign and signing up with their logo and name. But beyond that, what the Wellington Regional Council seems to have done is in their submission, they've said that they would like to see the government consider supporting the call that the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity has asked for. So supporting the call for free public transport for under 25s, for students and for community service card holders. So they just put that in as one item among many of the things that they were calling for in their submission.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering whether you've reflected on the long-term effect that COVID is likely to have on people's willingness to sit in public transport confined areas next to strangers, and whether that is whether you've reflected on that in terms of your request for the process of festival, but may well be a significant approach.
That's a really good question. Not a whole lot. I suspect that there'll be some hesitancy about that for a while. There may be other measures that will make that more acceptable to people, but regardless of that, what we can't do is continue to all drive around in our own cars. It's not going to be an option for too much longer anyway. So if it's not this, then maybe it's something else. And if in your work you decide that people are going to be entirely reluctant to get on public transport in its current form, then maybe we need to be far bolder and consider other ways of doing public transport entirely. But in the meantime, I suspect there'll be a lot of people willing to wear a mask, to be double vaxxed, to have the vaccine passports, to do all of the other things that are already on the public health agenda. And I can't imagine people are going to stop going out to restaurants and bars. And if they can manage it, I think our public transport sector can probably manage it too.
Thank you, Jolien. Councillor Phil Clearwater, have you got a question?
Thank you very much, Jolien, for coming and talking with us. I just wanted you I think you referred to that for some of the groups, for example, I guess it will be including community service card holders, but you referred to the barriers that people say on low incomes have. I just wonder, and like, for example, my understanding is that currently there are some ways for some community service card holders to actually have a reduced fare. I'm just wondering if you might perhaps be able to elaborate on those barriers for those particular groups that you referred to.
There's a number of barriers, Phil. I think we're all aware that it's very expensive to be poor in Aotearoa. One of the things that happens is increasingly lower socioeconomic areas get pushed to the margins of cities, and as the centre city becomes more expensive to live in, that'll happen increasingly. If your car breaks down and your budget simply does not allow what for many people is considered a luxury, like putting some new tyres on and repairing the car, you have no option but to use public transport if you want to get to the places you need to go, whether that's work or wherever else. So those are the kinds of things that that we had in mind by including community service card holders. Yeah, I mean, do you want more on that, or does that kind of answer your question?
Thanks, John. It's a good example of barriers for people on low incomes or benefits. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much. Any other questions for Jolyon? All right, well, Jolyon, I thank you very much. Look, I'd like to ask you to stay in the room if you'd like to listen to Kim Fowler. So if we get you to move over to those chairs there, that'd be great. And yep, and then we'll get Kim on. But she's online, and you could have been online too, but you might as well sit over there. Yes, we'll move the resolution that we receive the public forum from Jolyon White, Director of Anglican Advocacy, on the Free Fare campaign to fund transport for the community service card holders, students and under 25s, and that we refer the matter to the Chief Executive, because what we do, Jolyon, is we write back to you around what the outcome is from your submission. So I'm looking for a mover of that resolution, moved by Councillor Lan Fan, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. So thank you very much, and you will hear back from us, Jolyon. So now we're going to welcome Kim Fowler. Kim is the President of the Canterbury University Students Associations, and congratulations on being a student leader, Kim. Hold you in good stead for the rest of your working life, I'm sure, and your non-working life as well. It's a really good thing to do. So we'd like to hear from you now. So over to you.
Tēnā koutou. Kia ora, much for that welcome. And for fitting. I can myself on a very loud echo. Oh, that's better. Awesome. Great. Thank you. It was quite disconcerting. Cool. So essentially, I'm here again today. I think this is my 4th time in front of ECAN this year. So thank you so much for seeing me again. And obviously, we've been here before to request a discount for tertiary students' public transport in Canterbury. And firstly, I really wanted to thank ECAN for your consideration for that. And it's really exciting to hear that it's on the table for next year, and I'm hoping it passes through your annual planning process smoothly. So thank you. But when we went through that process with you and asked for that discount, what we did hear is that one of the struggles in introducing a concession like that is that many of you feel that we lack funding centrally, and that there may be other groups who can benefit from a concession. Some councillors have called for fares-free travel, which I understand that the modelling shows would be the fare setting that would have the greatest impact on our transport emissions. And as we know, these groups that we're calling for a discount for, students, community service card holders, and under 25s, there's a lot of overlap between those groups, but those will be the groups that would be most price sensitive and likely to change their behaviour if we were to introduce fares-free travel for them. It's this combination of factors alongside our passion for transport equity, the fact that our students have said to us that this is the way that they would change their behaviour, would be a discount or even better for travel to be free, has meant that the UCSA, alongside the Lincoln Students Association, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, and around 60 other organisations, I tried to count on the website before, it's gone up, that are calling on the Minister to fund free fares for community service card holders under 25s and tertiary students. So I'm here to support the call today for ECAN to join along with this collective alongside other councils and regional councils that have joined. I think this could be a great thing for Canterbury to increase patronage on our buses. And I think that potentially to the question earlier about COVID and who's okay with using the buses, I think alongside these groups being price sensitive, they're probably more likely, even in the COVID context, to respond to fares-free travel and fill up our buses again after we sort of recover from the pandemic. So I'll keep that short, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, any questions for Kim? No, it looks like we haven't got any questions today, Kim. So once again, thank you very much for coming. Oh, yes, we have. I'm sorry, Councillor Ian McKenzie, you go ahead.
Just on the COVID thing, Kim, what students, do they sit on the same national average in terms of having the double injection to all other citizens, or are they Have they got a high uptake of vaccination rates or a lower than average vaccination rates?
Yeah, great question.
And the follow-up question you might consider is, if for sake of argument we were required by government to only allow people with double vaccinations onto buses, how would that affect a free or concessionary bus fare for tertiary students?
Cool. So obviously the average age of the student population is lower than the general population, which has meant that in terms of the vaccine rollout, students are more likely to be in one of the later groups, which means we're catching up a little bit to some of our older populations who've got those higher percentages of vaccinations because they were vaccinated first. I've got confidence there, though, that it will sort of normalise over time as more students need to take the vaccination for whatever reason. And obviously for a lot of people, there's a strong motivator in terms of the summer ahead. I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but I do understand it is just slightly lower. In terms of affecting, like having to introduce it for people to come aboard public transport, I think that we need to keep our public transport safe for those who use it. And so that I'm sure that would be just something that we'd have to adjust to as users of public transport.
All right, thank you very much, Kim. That's really good. Thanks for that answer. Any other questions? No, they're not. There's no other questions. So we'll just pass a resolution that the council receives the public forum matter from Kim Fowler, President of the University of Canterbury Students' Union, on the Free Fares campaign to fund transport for community service holders, students and under 25, and we're referring the matter to the CEO for a response. So if I can have a mover for that one. Who's going to move that one? Moved by Councillor Nicole Marshall, second by Councillor Vicky Southgate. Worth. My brain's not working very good this morning. I'm very sorry, Vicky. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. Thank you very much, Kim, and thank you, Jolene, for your time in here. And we will get back to you. Good to see you back in the advocacy role again, by the way. That's great work that you do. Thanks very much. Right, we can take our masks off. Thank you very much, everybody. That's good. We're up to the minutes next. Has anybody got any issues with the minutes? All right, we'll move that. I need someone to move that we confirm and adopt as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of November, moved by Councillor Peter Scott, seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. Everybody in favour, that's carried. Thank you very much. I don't know that we've got any answers today or matters arising that we're sending back. If we have, we're leaving those to the next meeting. We're moving on now. We're up to item 7 on the agenda, 7.1.1, which is on page 16. It's the climate change report, action committee report. Is anybody speaking to that report? This is a resolution that we accept the minutes from the Climate Change Committee held on the 12th of August. And just so councillors know to note that there's no other recommendation there for consideration today. The follow-up recommendations on this background report will be undertaken at the next Climate Change Action Committee meeting. In the meantime, there'll be some actions taken around getting 2 outside people to sit on that committee as decided by the committee because it has delegated authority under the terms of reference from the council. So I can take this as moved by Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie and second by Councillor Vicky Southworth. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. Thanks very much, everybody. Moving on, we're up to page 25. This is the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. We're going to take these resolutions separately. First of all, we're going to take, do you want to speak to it? No. Yeah, we are, but we're doing it we're just doing it, the third one only. So all those, we're going to moved by Councillor John Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. Are you all right with that one, to accept the minutes? Yeah. Held on the Thursday, the 7th of October 2021. That are true and correct. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. Are we receiving the summary of the financial reports, or have we already done that? No, we're receiving the summary of the financial reports for the period ending the 31st of August 2021. Moved by Councillor John Sunkel.
Yes, I'll move. Yeah,
Me too, but anyway, we're doing it. Seconded by Councillor Claire. Do you want to second that one? Claire Mackay. All those in favour, please say aye. You're confirming the reception, Claire, of that there. That's on that there. That report there. Yeah, I did too, but anyway, we've got it separate. So we have a resolution on it. All those in favour, please say aye. That being nobody against, that's carried. Now, the next one is getting a little bit technical, because what we're going to do about number 3 is we're going to have a resolution to remove I'm going to move this motion, and it's actually condoned in the standing orders under 23.6. And I want to include an amendment. So the amendment is that I will remove from the agenda the item recommendation number 3. Could I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. Now, I should have said first, the reason I'm removing it is we've already done it at another previous council meeting, and it's on here by mistake. And no, do we want to do number 4? And we want a resolution for number 4. Notes the resolutions made by the committee under delegated authority. Refer to the committee's term. Oh, you don't need to do that. Okay. So we need to do that as well. Do you want to move that, John? Yes, moved by Councillor John Sunkel. Be confused. Yes, seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. All right, it's carried. Thank you very much. Yes, we've had it. Yes.
I understood from the earlier conversation that this report had actually come to council. Now you're saying that only parts of this report had come to council.
As I understand it.
So have we confirmed then the minutes of that meeting? We
have now, and we've confirmed the financial reports that were attached to it, and we've also confirmed the resolutions made by the committee in those minutes.
Can the full council confirm the minutes of an Audit and Risk Committee meeting, or do the members of the Audit and Risk Committee have the prerogative to confirm those?
Well,
minutes?
Technically, I'd say the council can do it too, but this won't happen again. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm still confused.
Yeah. Okay. It's all right now. It's fixed. Thank you very much. Like, Councillor Scott, did you want to say something?
No, just the matters coming out of this one. You've got
Okay. So, do you want to speak to that? Do you want to speak to something then? Yeah.
So I've got a couple of issues coming out of the notes, I guess, and I was waiting till you got through those resolutions.
You can do it.
Those up. So
yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, so I just want to look at the internal audit process, and I see there's an amendment there that the three-year internal audit plan and light of work to be undertaken to develop a risk and assurance map. So what is a risk and assurance map?
Councillor Sunkel, I'll ask you to answer, or do we need Giles?
We can defer that if it's.
I'm happy to have a wee crack at it. The risk and assurance map is looking across the whole business, the integration of what we have as an organisation and what we're looking at, rather than looking in particular silos and places. So a continuation of that work has been at our last Audit and Risk meeting, which is not in here, as a development of a new process and internal audits that will be put in place.
So just a point of clarification, we had a process that looked at 3 separate things on a revolving process. But what you're saying now is that they all will have equal standing, and you'll go to the areas that you think need audit.
Correct. We had a 3-year plan with Giles coming in as the new director. He has had a reassessment of where our internal audits sit and the appropriateness of some of those in consideration of challenges that the organisation is facing. So we have looked at a reprioritisation of those audits to fit the challenges that we face today and continue work in that space.
A separate question, Madam Chair, regarding our audit process that we're undertaking. I understand that the audit office itself is under extreme pressure in terms of personnel, and that we're having to make space for them in terms of our financial report this year, so an extra meeting. Are we assured that, have we got any assurance at all that the audit process is not going to get in the way of our annual planning process?
From my understanding, Audit and Risk Committee has looked at the draft of our annual report and had a run through questions and the like. That full finalised report will come back to Council. What I have asked is that all members of the Audit and Risk Committee be given a copy of that report for input into the Council meeting. So that process will run through, will be finished by Christmas, and it will not, as I understand, impact on our annual plan process.
All right, that's very good questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Sunkel, for asking. I think we can move on from that committee report now. We're going to move on to joint committee. 7.2.1 is the process we've set in place around the minutes from the Greater Christchurch Partnership. I'd like to ask Councillor Grant Edge and Councillor Phil Clearwood, would either of you two like to speak, or would you both like to speak? Who would like to go first? Grant, you can go first.
Yes, this report is basically receiving the information of the unconfirmed minutes, the Greater Christchurch Partnership. Just to refer, this is the meeting that was held on the 5th of November. One of the issues on page 47 relates to the partnership's submission on the Government's Enabling Housing Supply and Other Matters Amendment Bill. And so a submission went off, and just to highlight really a couple of things that the submissions of matters of concern to the GCP was related to a little bit about ensuring that that the bill delivers on our full wellbeings approach. There was just some concern that the bill, which basically allows for 3 houses on a single lot, 3 stories high, may not deliver the well-beings that are necessary in our urban environments. And with issues like recession planes, concern about families and visual amenity issues and that sort of thing. So we're really, the GCP was disappointed that the government didn't collaborate and engage with local government in the development of the bill. So community voices weren't heard on that. The process, I suppose the bill too, was part of this initiative from the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which is aiming at intensification of our urban areas to enable more housing to take place. So that's the real crux of it, really. There are potentially some exemptions that could come into play, and those matters are set out in the National Policy Statement. Just another couple of issues on page 51 I want to refer to, item 10 and 11. The bill didn't really include any sort of design standards, and is concerned about the quality of our urban designs on urban outcomes in that process as well. It's a part of a suite, apart from the NPS, It's recently the GCP has looked at Greater Christchurch housing development capacity assessments, looked at expression of interest on infrastructure acceleration fund, and we're also joined up with the central government on a GCP and urban growth partnership memorandum of agreements. And part of that next year will provide for more relationship or a closer relationship with government on transportation and housing issues to facilitate that urban growth agenda. So it's all part of a big picture, and it's just another element of government legislation.
Any questions about that particular area that Councillor Edge has spoken to us? Councillor Peter Scott.
Not particularly that, but on page 48 under the committee decision in terms of delegation to the Greater Christchurch Council Mayors, Canterbury Regional Council Chair and Committee Mana representatives, it talks about the submission process in terms of the Resource Management Bill, Amendment Bill, and also the Emissions Reduction Plan discussion document. Now we've got, in terms of, we've got the Merrill Forum, we've got RTC, we've got ECAN, and we've got GCP, all making submissions on the same bill. And I think I've asked this before in another forum. You would think if we're all from Canterbury doing the same thing that we'll be joined up on this stuff.
I think we made specific decisions not to be this time, didn't we, Jessie? I'll ask staff to comment. Do you want to make a comment, please?
We freestyle.
But I have had a look at them and made sure that they fit in with what we believe or what we say we're on about.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, certainly the partner staff through the Merrill Forum, the RTC and GCP, and including our own staff, have been coordinating on the submission content. Different focuses for different submissions. So the Canterbury Merrill Forum and RTC submission focuses on the broader regional transport and in particular the emissions from transport. The Greater Christchurch submission focuses in more on the urban issues that we're facing through the emissions reduction plan. So there is a slight nuances between the different submissions, but yes, they are, I can confirm that they are coordinated amongst staff.
Thank you very much. That's good. Anybody else got any questions? Okay, Councillor Phil Clearwood, would you like to speak to your part of it?
Well, thank you. Just in addition to the points in the GCP submissions, to what Councillor Edge has referred to, one of the key things I think was the tenor of our whole submission, which was certainly aligned with the other submissions that Councillor Scott referred to, was that in terms of the bill that we wanted places to be accessible, connected, well designed and resilient. Those basic things. And a problem that we asked to be rectified was the whole area around medium density residential standards, because they currently, in terms of the locations which will be allowed in the bill, certainly they would not be, there's aspects of that which would restrict them from being accessible to our communities, as well as them not being well placed for the provision of infrastructure, which is essential, and public transport would be an example. The only other thing I wanted to comment on in relation to the meeting was there is reference in the minutes too to that land covenants could limit the intentions of the bill, and we suggested that there be some, while this wasn't the opportunity to ask for changes around the issue of covenants and zoning, that we suggested that some legislative changes should be investigated to address that issue of covenants, which actually can be quite serious, have serious implications for Canterbury. So that was the only other main item on that agenda that I wanted to comment on, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. Is there any questions people have around that? All right, thank you very much. We'll move a resolution then. Can I take it as moved by Councillor Grant Edge, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater, that we receive the unconfirmed minutes as up there on the screen of the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee meeting held on the 5th of November 2021. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you all very much, and thanks for speaking to that. Grant and Phil, that was good. Now we're on page 52 of the agenda. Now just have to explain to you what's going to happen next. on page 52 of the agenda is 8.1. If you turn to page 141, you'll find 8.2. So what I'm going to do now is move a resolution that's up on the screen. Is it up on the screen? It will be in a minute. That's going to effectively substitute the councillors' resolutions for these resolutions that are on the screen. So basically, I'm removing those resolutions that are, those recommendations that are up there. Okay, so I'm moving that the council approves. Oh, is that the one? No, that's not it. I want to submit. I am moving that you submit 8.1 and 8.2. You substitute 8.1 and 8.2. Have you got that recommendation there somewhere? So I'm substituting councillors' amendments today for 8.1 and 8.2, and I've got some words that we've got here, but we'll just have to wait a minute while staff get them up on the screen. So we'll just take a wee recess for a minute. Right, I'm moving from the chair that we substitute the current recommendations 8.1 and 8.2 with amendments to the that's not what it should say, should it, Catherine? Substitute 1.2 current recommendations with amendments to the recommendations and submissions that are up on the screen. We'll change that last bit that are raised today that are up on the screen. Just get rid of that are raised today words. That are, it's both of them. This is on a recommendation that we do this. This is a process that's been worked out by staff. So I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott, if he will oblige. I'll put that to the vote. All those please say in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. Well, look, I've just explained it. What we're doing is we're substituting the recommendation on 8.1 and 8.2 for the recommendations we're going to have up on the screen, which are the amendments that people want considered, and they're going to raise them now as amendments. Okay, so no, I don't need to know from anybody what we should be doing or we shouldn't be doing. I've taken this on staff advice that this is the process that we're doing. So we're removing those resolutions because they say we're not going to do amendments to it today. This is advice from Catherine. Yes, Nicole, what is your issue?
Just a question of clarification. So on endorsing this, are we endorsing recommendations that we haven't yet viewed?
Yeah, all we're doing is making it in we're getting a process to move up amendments. Yes, we'll be endorsing those, all those things. We're not endorsing it at the moment because people want to make changes. Before it said we were endorsing it. So that's exactly right what you're thinking. So your question's quite appropriate and it's quite right. So what we'll be doing now is looking at the recommendations that people have made, and they'll be coming up on the screen, and each person will move those and we will debate them, and they'll either pass or fail then, and the submission will go out like that. Is there anybody that still doesn't understand? Claire?
It's clarity for me. 8.1 is around the waste submission. 8.2 is around the emissions reduction plan discussion. So you are suggesting that we're having a conversation and discussion and submissions on those two all together.
Yes, no, I'm taking the recommendation from Catherine. Catherine, you can explain that.
You've got recommendations in your papers. What we're proposing by this resolution is simply to substitute them with new and separate recommendations, Claire. So we're 8.1 and 8.2 currently contemplate the submission being accepted in its current form and no changes made. And the case of the two new sets of recommendations, which you'll still vote on separately. You'll work through, and they'll be specific to, in the first case, the waste minimisation, in the second case, the emissions program. But we're just saying essentially take out those ones and start afresh with these new ones that work through receiving the report, amending the report, and then each amendment will be separately considered and voted on, and then ultimately adopting that amended report, and the same as currently delegating to the Chief Executive any minor changes.
Yes, so Claire, the first amendment will be to the waste one, and that's an amendment we're going to make on page 141, or that Liz is proposing on 141. After we've done that one, which is the only amendment I have on that one, we'll be moving on to 8.2, where we have several amendments, and if we don't do it like this, we're going to be in a much worse position. So this is what we're doing. So I'll put that motion again, that we're moving to remove 8.1 and 8.2 from the agenda. That's moved by myself, seconded by Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Is there anybody against? There being nobody against, we will say that's carried. Now we're going to deal with 8.1. The amendment to 8.1, have we got that? That was the amendment that Liz proposed. Liz, are you wanting to propose this amendment? So you...
Yeah, I'll just read the amendment out.
Well, it's not an amendment anymore. It'll be a motion that you're moving.
Oh, okay.
So what is it? Can we have that in a bigger...
Yeah, so just to clarify, I sent round a proposed amendment earlier, and then we revised it, Claire revised it a bit to make it a bit simpler. So I'll read it again so that everyone
Well, wait a minute, we need to see it. Is this it, what we've got up here?
No, that's the main motion.
Jenny got hard copies too, if it would help.
I think we should better get it up on the screen, shouldn't we? We got hard copies. Where are the hard copies?
That's actually Vicky's amendment.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Okay, have we got that resolution? Tell it, read it out, Liz, what it is, and then staff can find it.
Yeah. So under the heading, as an additional point 23, the heading household chemicals and waste, a lot of invisible waste is washed into our urban wastewater and stormwater systems. These include personal care products, cleaning products, excess medications, and other household chemicals. Some of these compounds have an adverse effect on the environment, some bioaccumulate and are becoming problematic emerging contaminants. They are not currently addressed in this or other existing legislation. We need regulations and product stewardship pathways for this type of waste.
So the words, the resolution, have we got that up?
I see it 10:32.
Could everybody please read this? I'll take it that it's been read. It's moved by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. Thank you. Councillor Nicole Marshall has moved it. We'll take any questions. Any questions? Seconded it, sorry. Any questions? All right, any debate? Councillor Peter Scott.
I would not support this because I think it's too general in terms. It says a lot of invisible waste. I don't know what a lot means. It talks about wastewater systems and stormwater systems, and it talks about emerging contaminants, and talks about household chemicals, and it talks about medication. I don't know what this will mean.
All right. Well, are you happy just to vote against it, or would you like some word changes?
No, I don't want word changes. I'm just going to vote against it.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Councillor John Sunkel.
Thank you. Whilst I don't necessarily disagree with what's in there, I just have a real frustration with the process that we're running today. So I will have a standard vote against these resolutions and changes just because of the manner in which we're trying to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie.
I just would like to address some of the concerns that Peter has raised. There isn't actually very much research in this area. ESR and CIBR are doing some research. Most of it is, at university sort of level. It's not really covered in our legislation in terms of product pathways. And so I'm talking about the sorts of things that you use in your house. I've said here medications, household chemicals, cleaning products, personal care products. And so out of those compounds, there are certain chemicals that have been shown to accumulate and are becoming emerging contaminants. And so I just refer you to the Centre for Biowaste Research website, and there's quite a bit of information in there. These are of concern because they actually can cause an increase in things like drug-resistant bacteria. So there are other effects from them as well. But I think the issue mainly is that they're not being dealt with in our legislation.
All right, so we put the vote on that. Is there anybody else wanting to speak? All right. All those in favour of including this in the submission as up on the screen? What's the resolution we've got to start with this? There's a resolution. Where's the resolution? Okay, move. Oh, where's the resolution around that? It should say that we amend the current submission. If you've already written it, have you, Catherine? I haven't. Council agrees to amend. The council agrees to amend the submission by inserting an additional paragraph at paragraph 23. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah. All right, that's very good resolution. Moved by Councillor Mackenzie. I mean, in terms of process, moved by and seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. Yes, Councillor Mackenzie, are you wanting to?
Just a question, Madam Chair.
It's all right. I'll leave you.
So after you voted on this amendment, we'll then agree on whether or not we agree to the full submission. Okay. I'd just like to speak to the full submission.
That's excellent. Okay, I'll put that vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. It's only two people, I think. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Now we're going to put a resolution. Have we got the resolution that we adopt the
there's another paragraph of words as well, which I saw previously. It came before Liz is here. This bit. This is worked up with staff. So another option, another addition.
All right, who's moving this?
So I'm moving this one, and this is an addition, making a recommendation to invest in research and development, looking at potential waste streams that could become inputs to other systems and so other products. So it's circularising the waste system. And there wasn't any discussion in the document about funding for that type of research, so it's a suggestion that could be considered.
Okay.
So it's to add it in as paragraph 7. Added to paragraph.
Oh, that's on page 171, is it?
56.
Oh, 56. Yeah, sorry, of 171. 56 it is. All right, who's going to second that resolution? Seconded by Councillor Lan Farn. Are there any questions?
Sorry, is it paragraph 6 of the submission, which lists the stage 1 priorities, and you're proposing an additional bullet be added to that list?
That's what I thought that we did agree. It says paragraph 7 there, but maybe it's in addition to paragraph 6, I think.
It's paragraph 6.
Yeah, an additional proposed priority.
Everybody please read that. All right, it's moved by Councillor Southworth, seconded by Councillor Lan Farn, that we amend the resolution, the submission to add a further bullet point to paragraph 6 on page 56 of the main agenda. Are there any questions about this first? Right, any debate? Would you like, anybody like to speak to it, or have you done enough speaking about it? Peter.
Madam Chair, I take Councillor Sunkel's position on this, and we'll be voting.
Thank you for letting us know. Anybody else wishing to speak? All right, I'll move that. I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Okay, it's carried. Now we need a resolution that we adopt the entire submission. Have we got one of them? So we approve the draft submission to the as amended, I suppose, or as adopted. Well, no, we can have that because we got rid of as amended. Catherine did a good thing. Approves that the attached draft be submitted. I'll move that. Who's going to second it? Second by Councillor Grant. Edge. Yeah. Well, do we need with the additions? No, because yeah, I was thinking that with the additions. Yeah. Additions agreed, it should say on there. All right, full stop. Yes, any questions about that, or would anybody like to speak to it? Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to speak. I'm disappointed with the process we've been through for this, because it seems to me that dealing with waste is an important issue for us as a regional council, and yet we've had no ability to debate this in a public in a forum where we can have an informed debate and discussion. And I've read the submission. It seems to me that we're not addressing something that there's a rather naive approach in the whole process. The proposal from the Ministry, from the Environment, that we stop reducing waste rather than deal with the waste streams that we're already generating. And I'm conscious of the fact, but I'm not an expert on any of the solutions, that in fact that national and regional rules prohibit or make it very difficult for innovative practices for dealing with a lot of our waste. And I've been involved. I've had submissions from locals who are trying to use to encourage composting processes and organic waste disposal processes, which are constantly frustrated by rules, some of which are regionally generated and some of which are nationally generated, in terms of trying to lessen the amount of waste going to Cape Valley and increase the amount of disposal of that waste at a local level where the waste is generated in the first place. And I don't see anything in this submission or in fact the Ministry for the Environment's direction that deals with some of these issues. And I think, and it would be, I'm disappointed that we haven't had the ability to have that discussion to actually explore the opportunity for some solutions to some of these issues. And so this isn't a criticism of the submission itself, but it is a criticism of the process we've been through. And I think Councillor Sunkel expressed that same frustration earlier.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Peter Scott, do you want to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to speak to actually the paper and then also the submission, and I'm not substantively haven't got anything against what this is, but if you look at points 4 and 5 of the report, it talks about the existing responsibilities in terms of waste management, the TA and the central government and a 50-50 shareholder, and we are the regulator in that space. And then there is some mention that we might want to step forward into that space, and I would think that that proposes a huge risk to us both financially and reputationally. So I don't know how you can be the steward and the gamekeeper, the gamekeeper and the poacher at the same time. And I think that we need to make sure going forward that we keep an eye on this stuff, because I think and can I ask a staff member a direct question here, Madam Chair? Tosh, I think you wrote this, Toshi.
Just hang on a minute. Just ask your question. Just hang on a minute, Toshi.
And so the point that I'm trying to make that's covered in 4 and 5 on the paper, Toshi, is that covered in point 9 of submission?
All right, I'd like to ask Toshi to come to the table, please. Toshi, would you like to answer? Thanks very much.
Through you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Scott notes, there is some questions in the overall discussion document about roles and responsibilities. As Councillor Scott notes, those have not been in detail explored by this council. And so therefore we have focused on, in principle, noting that we could or may wish to at some point have a greater role to play. I reflect the aspirations that this council has expressed in its strategic direction and in its long-term plan to play a greater leadership role as a regional authority in the waste space. Section 9 of the submission is our attempt as staff to capture that, but as always would welcome any amendments to the staff submission should councillors wish to make them.
Well, I don't, is that answered your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely answers my question, but in support of what Councillor Mackenzie also said, and in support of what Toshi just said, I think we need to keep an eye on this. I think that there's a space here that we could fall into rather than be willing to walk into.
Well, I'd like to say that I've had that discussion with the CE. There's been some discussions along the way about waste management and what we've been doing about it. I remember early on we had a workshop and we have been raising this issue on a practical level and at a higher level. And I talked to the CEO about writing to the minister around this just while this has been coming up in process. And I think you're quite right. We need to have a workshop around it where we have a fully informed further discussion. So I think we can do both. We can put the submission in, pass this, and then get on with the further business of discussion, what our role might be. And indeed, it's a good timing to be doing that. So, Councillor Grant.
Yes, I don't see any issues with this at all, because the waste management thing that's going on in Canterbury has been problematic, and having a regional council take a regional perspective on location, distribution, and all of those other issues that are part of our submission is going to be really important, because it's a little bit of a mess at the moment. So
thank you very much, Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie.
I'd just like to speak in support of the submission. We had plenty of time to give feedback on this submission, and it was sent around several times. And during that time, I actually did put something in which addresses, to a certain extent, the issue that Councillor Ian Mackenzie raised around the possibility of unintended consequences which impede rather than assist the development of the circular economy. This is for small businesses with their initiatives around waste. But I would be very happy to second or support an amendment if Councillor Ian Mackenzie was to put it around making it easier to deal with organic waste on farm. Thank you.
Mackenzie, do you want to put that at this stage or not?
No, I'm not prepared to move an amendment until we've had an in-depth discussion. But I would point out that I wasn't referring to on-farm organic waste. I was talking about all organic waste. In fact, the biggest issue tends to be urban organic waste, not rural organic waste.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to have we'll have probably early next year. We'll move to have a workshop on this, and it's certainly something that we can be actively talking to central government about as this progresses. So I think that clears that up. All right. I'll put this resolution then. It's moved by who's moved it? I moved it. Who seconded it? Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. I'll put that. All those in favour of actually adopting this recommendation to send to the select committee. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Oh, that's which that one. Oh yes, and we'll move. I'll move from the chair that we delegate authority to the chief executive to make any minor and clerical errors in the submission are changed prior to the submitting to the ministry. That's actually on your papers. Seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you all very much. Now what we're doing is we're moving off that one, and thanks for your patience, everybody. We're moving on to 8.2, emissions reduction plan discussion document submission. And I want to thank staff and those councillors who work with staff in the interim to try and get some resolutions up around this. Let's see what we've got. We're going to go through exactly the same process this time. The first one was you, I think, Phil, with the soil stuff.
I'm happy to speak.
But
to
I
that
don't know what order it's in at the moment.
when it goes up.
No, we don't want that one at the moment.
Further down.
Well, just a minute. We'll deal with which one's up on screen first, Phil. Sorry, I just thought they might have done it in that order. Jesse's got some. Jesse, have you got hard copies? Oh, that'd be great. If you could hand them out, we'd really appreciate that. Thanks very much. Yeah, just do whatever you need to do. We're all fine with that. Which is the first one you've got? Have you got them in order? You give us that, Jesse. We'll have a look what you've got on there.
Yeah, so what we've got here is the copy of the amendments listed.
Oh, right, okay.
And a copy of the submission, including the track changes.
Okay, all right, great. So if you can just hand that out to everybody and that, you can give me one, that'd be good. Okay, so the first one, okay, so you should have the same as the sheet, have you? You got the same as that sheet? Yes. Okay, so what we got here, you've got that sheet that Jesse's kindly handing out at the moment. We're not going to pass number 1 first, obviously. We're going to go to number 2, that the council agrees to amend the submission as follows. The first one is moved by Councillor Clearwood, I think, is it? That the second. Okay, happy to move. The second sentence of paragraph 7 be amended as follows. This fare reduction is an opportunity to support people in Greater Christchurch to use low carbon transport by removing the cost barrier for those who qualify for reduced fares. Have we got a seconder for that resolution? Seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. Would you like to speak to it first? You go first, Bill, and we can have any questions.
Just briefly, I've suggested this amendment so that in fact it's clear that while we see the advantages of having fare reductions, that we're not actually making we haven't made any decision on it, but we are just putting it forward as a fact.
All right. Is anybody wanting to ask any questions or make a comment about that? Otherwise, we'll put it. All right. That's moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Edge. All those in favour? Oh, did you want to make a comment? Oh. Yeah. I'm sure you can't, but I thought we were doing it one at a time. But you read the whole lot. Off you go. Just hang on a minute, everybody. You're supposed to be reading the whole lot. Was me saying I wouldn't accept any resolutions today. I thought there was only a couple of resolutions, but once we do this makes it very hard to do it this way. So we're going to try, and I would suggest 2 things. If people think we need a workshop around a submission, please say during the process that would be something, because that's a good idea. We could do that. It's a very good idea. And the people who want to have the workshop could actually have the workshop. And we could talk about it. That would be a good thing to do. But the other thing is, if you want to make these amendments, please try and do them before we get to this, because it is really difficult for staff and everybody. Okay, Councillor Scott.
Madam Chair, may I suggest we just have discipline around amendments, because we've received amendments today, 9:23, 9:33, 9:43, 9:50 and 10:32 for a meeting that started at 10:30. That is not good enough. We've got a submission process that we agreed to on the 6th of October, and we're going through a meeting, which makes it very, very clunky if you're chairing it. And it's I was going to say depressing. It's not depressing. It's just not a good use of our time.
Well, can I say you are technically under the standing orders able to move amendments, so that's why I'm actually doing it. Councillor Clearwater, do you want to say something?
Madam Chair, I do, and it's that I think that this should be time well spent. Staff have put a huge amount of time into some excellent submissions. We're able to comment on them. I also just want to say that what we're looking at now in terms of emissions and climate change is the most important aspect in this whole planet right now. And it's extremely important that we give it some time. So I'm actually very pleased, in fact, we can have a process where we as elected councillors can also make our comments and amendments. It's good democratic process. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Scott, did you want to say something else?
Look, I'm Councillor Clearwater, in response to what you just said, this is not about the subject. I'm not talking about the subject. I'm talking about the process and the discipline as councillors that we need to apply. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not disputing what you said.
Oh, I would, thank you, Chair. Just on the process, I agree. Look, there's an ideal way to do things. We're very lucky in that as all of council, we got to submit in our comments into the submission. Staff took that on board. They did an excellent job. The process from there was that we would bring to the meeting, because there has been nothing in the interim, any changes, and that's what's happening today. And if we need a different process, then we need a different process, but that's where we're at. Thank you.
That's good, and it is democracy in action, and I do think that we should be able to debate it in public, but just if you can just at least give a heads up earlier what you want to do, it makes it much easier. So right, we're going now. Are we all right? Number 2, that the council agrees to amend the submissions as followed, moved by Councillor Clearwater and seconded by Councillor Edge. I don't think there were any issues raised about that before. All right, I'll put that one. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, it's carried. Right, we're up to B. Who moved this one? Councillor Edge, is this your one? Yes. That a new sentence be added at the end of paragraph 60 that reads as follows. Excuse me. Greening our urban environments to achieve carbon sequestration, I can't even say it, and deliver our emissions reduction targets will also support creating an environment conducive with mode shift. Okay, moved by Councillor Edge, seconded by who? Councillor Vicky Southworth. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Edge?
Yes, I've moved this extra sentence at the end of that number 660. Under that section, integrating land use, urban development and transport, it's a significant goal of the Greater Christchurch Partnership to make sure we deliver quality urban environments for people. And this really just adds to that, and it references the work being done by our partners. So it just makes sure that this greening part of the importance of carbon sequestration within our urban environments to make them healthier places is really important.
Would anybody else like to speak to this or ask a question? Councillor Vicky Southworth, do you want to say something?
Just to comment as well, it's very directly relevant to this particular submission in that greening our urban environment also reduces our need for extra cooling systems because it reduces the urban heat island effect. So it is a sensible climate reduction, reducing mitigation measure.
Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Well, I'm slightly amused that anybody's even proposing this, because under the government accounting system for what is considered carbon sequestration, to have any according to the government, any legitimate carbon sequestration, the greening has to be at least a 50 by 50 metre forestry block that can grow over 4 metres high. So is that what's being? Are we proposing various woodlots across the urban environment? Or are we just trying to do a bit of greenwashing with this proposal?
I think there's carbon sequestration possibilities in the urban areas that are outside that legislative requirement. So I think it's a general one. And indeed, there's a forest being created in Linwood, pocket parks everywhere. They won't be the size of that, but they'll be covered by another piece of legislation. So thanks for making that point. Anybody else want to say anything? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Number C, who's moving this one? This is yours, Vicky. I'll let you read it out.
So this is to replace or amend paragraph 78 to, we note evidence indicates that investing in improving public transport services, especially frequency and coverage, is likely to have an impact on growing ridership alongside levers such as reducing fares.
So you want to read out what we're replacing it with?
Oh no, that's sorry, that's
Oh, that
replacement.
is
Did
what
you
you're
want me to
replacing
replace
with.
Did
Oh,
you read the original? Sorry.
okay. Sorry, you didn't read the original. It looked like the same to me. Sorry, I've just reread it though. That's moved by Councillor Vicky Southworth. Who's seconding it? Councillor Lan Farm. Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Ian McKenzie.
I can't help but think that we're focusing on the wrong issue here. It's the cost effectiveness of the levers we're putting in place, not whether in fact they necessarily increase patronage. It's the cost of increasing patronage that's important to the ratepayers of this district. And free fares is a very expensive way of encouraging patronage. Better services is probably a far more cost-effective method.
Right, thank you. Anybody wish to speak or ask any questions? All right, I'll put I'll move that. It's moved by Councillor Vicky Southworth, seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? That's carried. Thanks very much. The next one is yours, Lan. Would you like to read that one out?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is proposing that we would like to see the government consider supporting the call for the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity and their Free Fares campaign for under 25s, community service card holders and tertiary students. And this is really just in support of this nationwide campaign that we've heard all about that makes so much sense. And I really appreciate Jolien making the point about national funding, which we can assume, I think, when it's something that does not directly impact our ratepayers other than through their taxes, is presumably a thing that we support generally. So I think this is a good thing to support, and it is different to looking at our own local or regional rating base. Thank you.
Right, that's good. Who wants to second that? Seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All right, anybody else wanting to speak? All right, I'll put that. Oh, Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Look, I really would like to support this, and in his submission today, Jolien indicated that the aspect of councillors' possible concern about predetermination. I have some concern that there can be a perception around that in relation to moving this now. There's not too much difference between us working regionally around getting the improving transport and lowering the cost on the one hand, and also though on the other hand with national central government doing that too. So I'm going to abstain on this, please.
Thank you for letting us know. Anybody else wishing to comment? Councillor John Sunkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And while I have sympathy with that amendment or addition, my frustration is that we do not have central government support for any and all transport initiatives, and so I find this rather clunky and messy and trying to pick winners or losers. So if it was a motion along the lines of further support for PT across the board, I would be happy, but I'm not in support of trying to find support for individual groups within the system.
Thank you for your point of view. That's great. Anyone else wanting to speak? All right, I'll put that resolution moved by Councillor Lan Farm, seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? How many people are opposed? Please put your hand up. 1, 2, 3. Oh, and please note that Councillor Phil Clearwater abstained. We're up to one moved by you again now, Councillor Clearwater. Do you want to read that one out, please?
So, right, so we're on to E. So this is a new paragraph, 118, I think. So we support development of agricultural innovations, including sequestering carbon in the soil through improved farming practices and natural soil building processes. And what I'd like to say about that is, I think a lot of people at this table watch Country Calendar. I think at least five items that over this year the Country Calendar has shown are around regenerative farming and also organic farming. So we're familiar with the processes. It's just really about how, in fact, we make sure that we encourage government to get support for the whole concept of sequestering carbon in the soil too. And basically, for those who don't watch Country Calendar, it's around rebuilding its sponge so that we have healthy soils, so that more nutrients are available. It's quite straightforward. And we need to do this to save the planet. So I won't speak any more about this right now, but I am assuming there'll be support for it.
Thank you. We haven't got a seconder for this resolution, seconded by Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. Okay, who else wants to speak? Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was happy to second this motion. This was flapping my hands.
Oh, sorry, Ian. I thought you were wanting to speak.
Not because I dwell on the science that Country Calendar puts in place.
Because you do. I know it's because you do it already.
But because I am actually a qualified soil scientist, and the reality is that the best way of increasing carbon in our soils is through irrigated, well fertilized pasture growing. And in fact, most of our highly productive pastoral irrigated pastures in the Canterbury area are probably close to their carbon carrying capacity in terms of soil carbon holding capacity. And so I'm in favour of this. I would also note that actually Councillor Clearwater's view that regenerative agriculture is going to increase carbon in the soil is probably misguided, but there are some very good ways of increasing carbon in the soil. And so as a practitioner of exactly these practices over the last 40 odd years, I support this amendment.
Okay, anybody else wishing to speak? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? Abstain? Please note John's uncle is abstaining. I suppose you want it noted. Peter Scott, you want it noted? Okay, it's noted. I do think, Jessie, is that 119 or 118, that clause? Because we've already got 118 on page 158.
Yeah, it's 119.
119, I think. Can we get that, Jessie? Is that all right? Or are you joining it on to 118?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think we were just trying to keep for the council the numbering of the paragraphs, so that when we were looking at each of the amendments, because there were so many, this could be added as a new paragraph, cool. 119.
That's good. Thanks, Jessie. That's great. Okay, we're up to number F. This is moved by Councillor Vicky Southwood. Oh, yes, it's carried with those people noting that they're abstaining. Who noted? John Sunkel and Peter Scott. Yeah, that's carried. Number F, moved by Vicky. Would you like to read it out, Vicky?
So I have, following on from the end of paragraph 118, that we also note that a reduction in, and I'm thinking the word fossil carbon would be more explicit here. So we also note that a reduction in fossil carbon emissions through reducing the use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser, imported phosphate and palm kernel exfoliar feed, PKE, could also support an improvement in water quality outcomes.
Have we got a seconder for that one? Seconded by Councillor Lanfan. Okay, do you want to say any more, Councillor Southworth, or are you?
Yeah, no. So just we hear that or know that methane is a challenge for our agricultural sector to reduce. That there are there's a need for technologies that are currently under development in order to start really addressing methane outputs from livestock, for example. But there is actually a fossil carbon footprint to agriculture in the form where you're applying synthetic fertilizers and importing feed from palm oil waste product. And so that is a carbon footprint that could actually be addressed at this time. It doesn't need new technology to come forward. There's the carbon footprint, fossil carbon footprint is both within the production of those materials and also the transport of them to the field. And so here's an opportunity to reduce the fossil carbon, which we understand is the primary of primary importance. It's why there's such a lot of focus on transport, both freight and urban and rural movement. So here's an opportunity for reducing that fossil carbon.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ian would like to speak. Your turn, Ian.
Look, this proposed amendment is muddled in its thinking and in its wording, and so I can't possibly support it. But I also note that actually a reduction of the use of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers is directly contradictory to the previous amendment we just passed. And so you can't have both of these. You can't reduce the use of fertilizer and want to increase the amount of carbon sequestration in your soils. They are incompatible. This should be voted against. It's not. There's no reduction in carbon emissions by not using fertilizer. Sorry. In fact, fertilizer increases the amount of carbon dioxide taken out of the atmosphere and therefore reduces the effect of the greenhouse gas emissions.
I know it's a misery. I don't agree. I think I think this amendment is complementary actually to the earlier amendment that I spoke to. The fact is that it's essential that in fact we have less synthetic inputs into our soils. That way there's less risk to the soil and to the whole ecology. So it's precisely different thinking, and it might be thinking outside the square, and there might be some new science that we need to have more information on. But it's essential that in fact we make sure that there's more nutrients that are naturally in the soil, that they're the ones that are available. So I'm certainly supporting this amendment too.
Oh, Councillor Claire Mackay, you can go.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to debate this in public, Madam Chair. I'm really interested in looking forward to the fact that it sounds like the agricultural industry is actually going to be able to get some benefit from the carbon sequestration and utilise that as an offset for agricultural emissions. So really pleased to hear that. A couple of comments ago from you. With respect to this amendment, it is extremely muddled, and now we've had a further suggestion that we have fossil carbon emissions, and that was the substantive argument that was put forward there. Nothing around water quality at all around removing or reducing the carbon emissions. Agriculture is already in the ETS as far as that goes for all our carbon emissions and transport. So I'm not quite sure where the benefits lie with making any changes to this. I initially read it and then interpreted it as aligning our policies in the amendment that was put on the table. But obviously that is not the case. However, based on my initial reading, I think that I just draw councillors to the original point 27 and the submission that's been drafted by staff in the original 100 points 114 and 15, and they do cover the fact around that we're asking for alignment of policies by central government. So those things are actually already been acknowledged. I think this is a superfluous amendment, and I will be voting no.
All right, Councillor John Sunkel.
Councillors Mackay and Mackenzie have, I guess, summed up my thoughts. It goes against all my knowledge, all the science, all my education of how to produce and grow. Our soils within Canterbury and New Zealand have some of the highest carbon in the world. Without going into a whole regenerative debate, regeneration in those depleted soils with no such structure and substance, yes, it works. We are talking about a completely different beast. And so to come up with some ideology and a belief that things might change from that. I just cannot support it because it goes against all the science and the knowledge that we have in conventional world.
Councillor Ian, Councillor Grant Edge. Oh, my brain, you've all, something's happened to me.
Thanks, Chair.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this because it does actually complement the previous one and in terms of building soil processes and science is telling us around the world that adopting regenerative and organic processes is actually better soil building, better pasture management without the use of fertilizers. Our largest dairy farming operation in New Zealand, Pamu Farms, is gradually transitioning all of its farms across New Zealand to organic agriculture. And they are making more money, less inputs, and to some extent this fossil fuel emission by reducing nitrogen fertilizer is something that we need to consider. The government is already in the NPS, and I think it's really important that that those two things complement each other. One is an input, and the other is a different way of managing our pastures. So I'm supportive of this.
All right. Did anybody else wish to speak? Would you like to speak again, Claire? I will allow that.
Okay, look, I just would like councillors to actually be aware or make themselves aware of the research that's actually available in New Zealand around regenerative processes and what the actual principles mean and how they're actually applied in New Zealand. So I just encourage you to go and do some research. Manaki Whenua, we've got a heap of stuff there, thank you, research. And there is a lot of questions that's to be answered, and I think the conversation is that we're actually doing 90-odd% of those, carrying out 90-odd% of those principles in New Zealand already. I think the other thing just to remember, if you replace synthetic nitrogen fertiliser, all being equal, in fact, if you haven't got a whole lot of pests like clover root weevil, which will decrease clover production, you'll actually you still get nitrogen production anyway. So it just offsets one after the other over 2 or 3 years. So I think that there is an opportunity for this council to become upskilled in pastoral systems in New Zealand. And I'd like to see us have some workshops on that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Lam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really happy to second this. I feel like there's a bit of panic in this response to this very simple sentence about through reducing the use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser, imported phosphate and palm kernel expeller feed, which internationally it's very clear that it has devastating impact if we look on a global scale. If we reduce that, it could also support an improvement in water quality outcomes. This is the general premise of our regulatory system in this building. It's about reducing our outputs. There's nothing crazy here. It's very simple. I'm very happy to support it, and I'm actually surprised at the response to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Ian. I think
just to point out, it's not the last part of that that is muddled. It's the first part, and the first part's nothing to do with water quality. It's all to do with reducing carbon emissions. And actually, the fact is that if you reduce the use of nitrogen and phosphate inputs into our crops and pastures, you don't reduce carbon emissions. You increase carbon emissions.
Sorry, that's Councillor. No, I'll leave it.
Look, I think we need to kind of like give credit to new science and not just live on old, outdated science. What I'd suggest, perhaps, if people haven't bothered reading or listening to Dr. Walter Yenny, for example, from Australia, that you do so. And I thoroughly commend it. If you did, you would certainly support this.
So you're replacing witchcraft with science.
okay, Councillor Southworth. Oh, sorry, Phil, did I cut you off? Councillor Southworth, you need.
So yeah, just to clarify, and the reason why I added the fossil carbon component in there is because you need to be looking at the two things are not incompatible at all. You need to look at the full life cycle analysis. And in this case, understanding the difference between what's a fossil carbon and what's carbon that cycles within the biosphere. And the muddle here is that those two things are being compiled together, whilst in fact they're separate. And so reducing fossil carbon emissions, the whole reason why agricultural methane, for example, is being asked to be considered separately from fugitive emissions from natural gas, which is all methane, but one comes from a fossil source, the other does not, the other is in the biosphere. And so this is explicitly stating that there are fossil carbon emissions associated with the production and the transport of these products, some of which are coming from the other side of the world, that footprint is enormous, and we can as well grow, and through Councillor Clearwater's discussion and the research into various more ecologically sound ways of growing products, that we can work with the nutrients that are existing within our current biology without needing to add additional fossil carbons in the process of growing our food. And that's the difference. So just to make that clear, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to cut this discussion off now. So we've got a resolution moved by Councillor Southworth, second by Councillor Lam Farm. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, please say they're opposed. No. Okay. Division? Who said that? Did someone say that? All right, we'll have a division. Let's write the number down. F.
Councillor Frankel, for, against or abstained.
Against.
Apology. Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Yes.
Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you.
Councillor Lam Farm. Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Phil Clearwater.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
Abstain.
Councillor Edge.
For.
Councillor Southworth. Chair Huey.
For.
Councillor Pauline.
For.
Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. 7 for, 4 against, 1 abstained.
That's carried. So, all right, we're on to number G. Who's moving this one? I don't seem to have it here. Who's moving?
Thank you, Chair, that's me.
Oh, yes, you're Lam.
So this is about lending. We've got really good stuff in our submission about promoting regeneration of native forests and also incentivising the planting of new native forests. But there is a particular submission put together by a group which is a collaboration of organisations, including the likes of Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, QE2, Federated Farmers, and many others, who are specifically tuning their minds to being really clear about what needs to change, not only in the ETS but in other legislation, to really make change to incentivise these things for people who want to actually do the right thing, which is so many people. So I propose that we explicitly refer to their submission and our strong support for it. Thank you.
Is that submission up online? Is it or somewhere? Where is that submission?
So I shared this submission with
everyone,
councillors, but it was in draft form.
Right.
They were going to make some further tweaks to it, but like any submission, it's will be available when all the submissions are available.
All right, thank you. Who's going to second that one? Councillor Vicky Southworth. Right, who else would like to speak or have anything to say about it? Councillor Peter Scott.
I gave a blanket no at the start of this, but I will support this because it was introduced early enough and it was circulated early enough. So I find myself supporting.
Councillor Scott, who else would like to speak? Anybody? All right, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Oh, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now we've just got to move this technical one, which is 3, delegates to the Chief Executive the power to, fix up any minor issues or clerical issues. But before that, I've just realised we actually need to approve the whole thing, which I'll just amend that to we're going to move approves the council final submission discussion documents as amended, I suppose. Do we need, Catherine? As amended. So moved by Councillor Lan Fan, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwood. All those in favour, please say aye.
I'd like to speak.
Oh, you want to have a discussion? Yeah, all right. Yes. Who would like to discuss this? I'm getting hungry. No.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to generally comment how much appreciation and thanks there is for staff. This is like one of the most important things that we will do in terms of this council's voice to government in this term. Personally for me, I just so appreciate the way that you captured council's views that's continued to today in you helping us get through to now, where we have a final submission in front of us. So I really just want to add my thanks. And yeah, I'm really proud of the submission. I think the language in it is fantastic. I think it's where we need to be in terms of a regional group that, is tasked with showing leadership in Canterbury. And I think this submission is doing that. And I look forward to us in our various other ways over which we have responsibility and influence to progressing this kind of kaupapa and voice and further elevating it. So thank you.
Right, okay, Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to join Lan, starting by thanking staff so much for an excellent submission in terms of the outline, and I thank councillors for adding to this today. But it just seems to me the submission seems to cross all sort of parts of the work that's done by this council, and I think that's really commendable. It doesn't always happen. There's been a huge lot of very hard work, as Councillor Farm has implied, that's gone into the submission. I think the submission is clearly, just from the debate today, it's clearly challenging, and so it should be. The issues that we have to address around emissions are hugely challenging. And I think it's brave, though. It actually states the facts quite boldly in terms of all of the sectors, including agriculture and transport, for example, and fossil fuels. It covers the lot. And so I just really applaud the fact that at this stage as a council, we're able to pass this resolution so that in fact this submission goes to Parliament. And I think, Madam Chair, you might have made a comment earlier that a government member of Parliament who chairs a very important government committee made the comment that in fact the submissions that are received from Environment Canterbury are held in high regard. And I think council should keep that in mind, and so should staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. Now we've got Councillor John Sunkel, and then we'll have Councillor Clear and Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reading the submissions that were in our paper, I guess I found myself somewhat agnostic. I had submitted on some, chosen not. There were points I agreed with, points I disagreed with, but nothing that was going to wind me up or rile me. And I was quite prepared at this meeting to come and support the submissions going forward. My real frustration are both the late amendments that we have put into it and amendments that are quite significant and challenging that should have and would require further debate and information. And so I will vote against the submissions, because I do not believe that we have in fact had a real conversation about the submissions that have gone in, whether it's regenerative agriculture, whether it's fertiliser, whether it's transport, a number of things. So the lateness of those conversations lead me to a point where I cannot support it. As I say, I would have supported the submissions as they came to council in the paper, but with the conversation today, I cannot support.
Thank you, Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to thank staff for this document that was provided to us and the opportunity to have a briefing early in November, at which we had a second opportunity to provide some feedback. So I've been silent up until now about the process, but I am also very, very frustrated with the process that we seem to change at our will when we've already voted on previous processes at council here. Like my fellow councillor here that's just spoken, I too came along and I was okay to support the document as it is, but heard me vote against one particularly, F, the amendment here, and have very strong feelings in that. And similarly around E, I was not happy with that either. So today I will not be voting for this in this form. I do not believe it is council policy. We need to have the discussion in a much better manner than what we have here.
Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Just to reiterate Councillor Sunkel's and Mackay's comments, really, I was prepared to support the original submission. The additional amendments, especially Amendment F, has moved the tone of the submission into the area of witchcraft and political rhetoric rather than based on good science, and I can't possibly support that. So I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Tumu Taiao, Yay and Cremor.
Kia ora tātou, anei te mihi ai te kia koutou ki ngā kaimahi ai whakariki tēnei tono ki te kawanatanga, mihi ati kia koutou. And supports of comments that already councillors have mentioned about, we were the first council in New Zealand for the climate emergency, and I was part of that. So I really like how you've been bold and ambitious in this mission to the government, and also, climate change and just put in, as Councillor Clearwood has already mentioned, across our organisation here. So I really commend you for that. But also I really like how you in point 23 just mentioned about embedding the Te Riti o Waitangi articles into the government framework and taken away from the principle. So I really commend on that. And we need more of that conversation so we can push that through at the central government level. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Edge is first, and then Councillor Peter Scott.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I want to thank staff as well for the submission. Covers a lot of ground, and I'd like to thank you too, Chair, for allowing these amendments, motions to be put, because all of them have passed unanimously, or with majority. Sorry, with majority. Which is a reflection of the fact that the submission was great and we had an opportunity to think a little bit more because of the importance of this. It is all of those amendments that we've just made following the trajectory of environmental improvement, which is why we're here. And it actually follows on from all the upping of the environmental output, which we discussed at our last council meeting on PC7, where we are changing the processes for our agriculture and for our general environment in a trajectory towards greater improvement. And this government emissions document is kind of heading in, hopefully, in that direction as well. So yeah, that's just my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. Councillor Peter Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a wee bit saddened at this point in terms of the fact that I'm not going to support the submission based on the fact that I see farming again signalled out as an opportunity to get some personal points across. I represent, as does Elizabeth McKenzie, 35% of the land mass of Canterbury, and most of that is covered in farming. And that is the support of our community is from farming. And I find the fact that we're continually putting stress on farmers through these types of additions to submissions that are already been through, I find that quite stressful actually in terms of where I'm coming from. We've been part of a process and we've allowed this to happen, and I'm not really happy with that. I don't think that we get the opportunity to actually listen to people around the table. There's about 120, 130 years of farming experience around the table, and it's dismissed every time they open their mouths about something. And you know, Google seems to reign, and that disappoints me. And maybe it's just my age, you know, in terms of, you know, I'm a bit more tactile, I guess, than some of the younger members around the table. I think that our submissions, as written, were I could have supported them, and I think the staff done a fantastic job, and they always do a fantastic job. But I find it really a bit stressful in the fact that I'm not going to be able to put my support behind this.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in support of this submission. I think that the staff have done an excellent job with this. We had plenty of opportunities to be involved and to give our feedback. It was quite a tight deadline, which is possibly why some of these amendments have come out recently. But I think everyone needs to remember we're in a democracy here, and to have robust debate around these issues and to have majority voting, it's completely normal. It's what we should be doing. And to Councillor Scott's comments, yes, we represent the farmers in South Canterbury, but we also represent the people in the towns downstream of those farms, and they drink the water that's coming to them. And in some places, water's not of good quality. And so we need to think about everyone in our area, not just one group. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Nicole Marshall, would you like to speak?
Yeah, kia ora. I really want to thank the staff for all of the effort that they've put into this. Like I think both Lan and Liz have said, you did set out a clear process. There was a couple of tight time frames, but everyone who wanted the opportunity to submit had the opportunity to submit. And you did a really good job of pulling all of everyone's ideas into a really solid submission, same as the previous one we voted on. And I kind of want to echo the sentiments that Peter expressed on the last submission, that the scale of amendments proposed today does not reflect good faith process. I totally accept changes happen on the day, but for me, the scale of changes that have happened, it hasn't given me opportunity to fully digest and understand the implications of what we're saying. That's why I abstained from the vote around the palm kernel, etc. I didn't understand enough to have an opinion, and I'm going to be abstaining from this vote as well because I don't understand fully the implications of the changes that we have made today.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Anyone online? All right. Councillor Vicky Southwood.
No, I'd just like to say as well, when I received the submission, it's in the agenda, it's fantastic. It covers a huge amount of ground. There's a lot of integration across different sectors and different, different groups of people who are going to need to respond. We've had so much press over the last few months about the urgency of climate action. We have a climate change action committee. We have signed up to a climate emergency and so on. And on rereading this, I felt there were a couple of extra points that could strengthen this submission, and that's why I made the proposals that I did. And I emphasise the fossil carbon because that is the thing that we have, I think, collectively, it's recognised fossil carbon is absolutely critical. And we followed a democratic process, and I feel like there's very much there's lots in there on transport and so on. Do not see farming singled out in here. And at the end of the day, this is a submission. And so it goes into the thought processes of those up at government and will be reviewed, assessed, and those with expertise will then draw out
their conclusions from this. So it's not, you know, it's not a be all and an end all. It's a good document, an important process, and I'm really grateful that we've got to this point, and I'll be voting in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak? I want to say thank you very much to staff sincerely for all your work. It's fantastic to have your dedicated assistance in these tasks. So we really thank you. The reason that I wanted these submissions to end up at council is demonstrated today, because I don't think it's the chair and the deputy chair or the chair's job to adjudicate on these difficult issues. This is about democracy. So if people want to put amendments on the day, they should be able to. But it does, you can see how it makes it a little bit of a different process, and for some people a more difficult process to do it like this. But it's not up to the chair to adjudicate and make the decisions around the final decision making. It is democracy that we are doing here today. So thank you for all persevering with the process, and I'll put it to the vote.
Can I just say that if we had time with this, I probably would support the submission. If we had time, but we didn't, and so therefore I find that, and I agree with what you said in terms of putting that pressure on the chair to sign it. So I agree with that, but I just don't think, you know, the last one came at 10:32 and we started at 10:30. I don't think that's right.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I did make that point earlier. So let's try and get it a bit sorted before we get here on the day, because everybody has a different approach to this, and I think it's good if we work collaboratively. So, but just to finish off, staff have gone the extra mile with this and really listened to us and changed the submission. It's very hard to do these submissions, so you've done a great job. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please. Oh, actually, we're moving the resolution that's up on the screen here. Approves the Canterbury Regional Council's final submission, and the title and then the discussion document as amended. I'll move that. Seconded by, did I get a seconded before? Seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. No. And would anybody like to note their abstention? Yeah. Or they're voting against or abstention. And now Cole Marshall is abstaining. Peter, what are you doing? Against? You'd like that noted? And Councillor Ian, against? Noted. Councillor Sunkel? Yes. Noted. Yeah. Do you want yours noted, Councillor Clare? Noted. Against. Okay. All right. That's carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, there's the one about, sorry, I've forgotten the other one that I'd started to do before now, so that's good that Catherine reminded me. Delegates to the Chief Executive the amendment of any minor or clerical areas in the submission prior to submitting to the Ministry for the Environment. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. Is there anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have lunch now because it's arrived and we need to have a break, and I'll lose my voice if I keep on going now. So we're having a break until 1:05. How's that? Or 1:10. Well, let's make it 1:15. It's nearly 1:45 now. 1:15. Thank you very much. We're reconvening. We're up to item 8.3. 8.3 on page 162. We're up to speaking to that report today. The climate change emergency report will be Councillor Craig Pauling.
All right.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, so pleased to introduce this update, which is largely about the recent International Wetlands Conference and other wetland work that we've been doing at Environment Canterbury. If there's anything I'll miss, I'll ask Tim Davey if he's in the room to step in. But some people may know that we had the International Wetlands Conference here in October, although it became an online event after, with COVID and stuff like that. But it was a pretty big deal. It was the first time we've had that Intercoal Wetlands Conference here in this part of the world. And it was actually put off from 2020 and then decided that to make it an online event. And one of the things, we've had a number of staff involved in the organising committee, of course, and acknowledge the people that have been involved with that. And one of the things that happened at the conference was a showing of the, sorry, that's just my other computer making funny noises. Was a showing of a documentary that our team at Environment Canterbury have put together with our partners on the Whakaora Ahuriri project, which is the restoration project at Ahuriri Lagoon on the lower Huritini, Horsell River, near Motu Karara. And that was shown at the conference, and yeah, I'm not going to say too much more about that because I was in it, but it was I heard that it was well received. And I might ask if Tim can do a little bit of an update about the other stuff in the paper, if that's okay.
Thank you, Craig. Yes, Tim, would you like to come to the table? And I heard that the documentary was seen as excellent, Craig, and I heard that from very excellent people, so it must be right. So thank you for all that work. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Craig has already, Councillor Pauling has already described about the conference and the Ahuriri Lagoon film, so I won't talk about that. But the other items that are in here, the climate change impact report has been described before, but this is a piece of work that's nearing completion. So this is taking the NIWA report that you'll recall. There was a NIWA report looking at the potential impacts across Canterbury, and this is then taking it down to look in areas, the domain areas around freshwater, aquatic, coastal biodiversity, wetland habitats, and as well as hydrology and groundwater and some of the other areas. So that this is a piece of work that's ongoing. We're hoping to have this completed very soon. Apologies, I'm just trying to quickly read the paper myself, and
That's quite all right. So, Councillor Elizabeth, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I would. So our wetlands are a really important part of our ecosystem infrastructure. They provide resilience to flooding and sea level rise, but more importantly, as emphasised in this paper, they're actually more powerful than tropical rainforests at sequestering carbon. They're real powerhouses, particularly peak wetlands when it comes to sequestering carbon. And we've lost something like over 200,000 hectares of wetlands in New Zealand that's been turned to high production farmland. And so I've kind of got two questions around that. Firstly, there are ETS credits that government provides for forests. Do they offer them for wetlands? And if not, are we lobbying government to provide some more incentives or credits for wetlands? And my second question is, what is the comparison between carbon sequestration of high production farmland and peat swamp? Are there some figures on this? Because that's something that's been raised before. And if you don't know, then coming back to us would be good.
through you, Chair, the ETS scheme as it stands now doesn't have anything around wetlands, so it doesn't provide for carbon sequestration of wetlands. There is around the world, there is quite a lot of, no wetland is the same, and some wetlands are actually losing carbon. So it's not a simple thing just to kind of say a wetland produces or sequesters carbon, and this is one of the reasons that it hasn't been included in the ETS, is because of, it's not so much science contention as just that there are differences around the place, and that's quite a tricky thing to be able to measure, to be able to actually quantify the amount of carbon that is being sequestered. But in general, I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Mackenzie, that the scale of sequestration by wetlands is really significant, and that is well known. I certainly don't have off the top of my head any numbers, but we can come back to you around how it would compare to pasture. That's something that I know there has been work on it. I just don't have it in front of me.
Thank you. Has anybody else got a question? Councillor Ian McKenzie and then Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Look, Tim was the director of witchcraft and political rhetoric as opposed to the director of science. Now, I want to refer you to point 11 on page 163. You've seen that. It's about braided river bird nesting sites. Everything I understand about certainly the black-billed gull is that actually they're not too impacted by floods, and they need low gravel bars and islands in the middle of our rivers to actually nest on to avoid predation. So I just question the validity of that comment in that
paper. Sorry, through you, Chair. They have adapted to nest on braided river systems that don't have the weed infestations that are currently there now. So they do require the braids and the bars and things, and it has the additional thing now with different mammalian predators of protecting them if those become islands. The spring floods do have an effect on chick mortality. Generally, I mean, it depends a bit on how often they occur. Quite often, what will happen is that the birds can actually nest another time and can move and things, but it does depend on if they are becoming more and more frequent, then it does have an effect on mortality. So we would expect to see the predictions from climate change around greater flooding to have an impact on the mortality, on the life cycle of the birds. Perhaps that's what I'll say.
Okay, and thank you, Tim. I'm reassured by those comments. But I was just going by the comments that Edith Smith made, who monitors the black-billed gull colony on the Ashburton River by State Highway 1, where they were flooded 3 times, and yet by the 3rd hatching, they still had a record hatching once the floods had finished. So they seem to be very resilient to flood, not resilient to predation, as the recent case in the Waireka area has shown.
Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Thank you. I was just under in point 10, there's the comment that with rising sea levels, we're squeezing those coastal wetlands, but there will also be rising groundwater with that rising sea level. So will that present opportunities? And if we plan ahead, does that provide opportunities to actually enhance and increase wetlands along those areas with that rising groundwater?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, it does, but I guess it really depends. It all depends on the response on how. So it squeezes if we try and maintain infrastructure in its current place, and therefore there might be pumping of groundwater or something to stop that change. But if it was left to its own devices, then yes, everything would just sort of move back, and those wetland areas would remain. But given the infrastructure that we have in place, like cities and roads and things, there tends to be the case that it squeezes it rather than allows it to naturally move back when there would be more opportunity, exactly as you've outlined.
So potentially there is, like, planning ahead, given the period of time that we have moving, with this incremental increase in sea level rise, we could anticipate and incorporate that into our plans, presumably, and actually recognise that that's a type of environment that's at risk, and try and accommodate that. Thank you.
Right, are there any other questions? Thank you, Tim. There doesn't look like it. Thank you very much. Well, we'll put it to the vote. Is that moved by Councillor Vicky Southworth and seconded by Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie, that we receive that report? Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. There's nobody opposed. I don't think that's carried. Thank you very much. We're moving on. We're up to page. Yes.
Just before we go to public excluded,
Yes.
with Director Giles in the room, I just wonder if he might just answer the questions that were put to me that I may have inadequately answered.
Oh yes.
The first question, which I think I probably did, but the first question was internal audit and risk and assurance mapping, just what that involves. And the second question was, does the Audit New Zealand challenges of timing affect the annual plan? To the second question, I said no, that's still on track, but just a description of risk and assurance map, if we could, please.
Do you want to come to the table? That'd be good.
Certainly.
You're going to do this one. I think so.
Through the chair, yes, in relation to the impact on the audit and the annual plan, Audit New Zealand are on track to deliver the audit in time for the council meeting. I think it's on the 16th of December, and it will not impact on the annual plan process as far as we are aware at this point in time. In relation to the relationship between internal audit, assurance mapping and risk management, they do have a strong relationship to each other. I am trying to initiate a piece of work to look at the business of the council and the areas there where the council and us as senior management would require assurance in terms of the key risks that the business faces. So there's obviously a strong relationship there between the two, but there are some fundamental areas where you would normally expect internal audits to be providing some assurance. And those are reflected in the initial programme that we've agreed for the remainder of 2021-22. Things like making sure that our policy frameworks are up to date and making sure that we're following up and implementing previous recommendations from audits. We will also be undertaking work to revise and update our risk management framework. And as I say, there's a kind of iterative relationship between the three. And what we would then aim to present back to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee before the end of the financial year is a framework that sets out the areas of interest as per the terms of reference, how that assurance is being provided through various controls using what's called the 3 lines of defence, which ultimately the 3rd line of defence is independent assurance, and also how those link to the revised and updated risk management framework, which we will be engaging the council in developing. We will attempt to produce a diagram and a visual that probably makes that a little bit clearer than my verbal articulation.
Sounds good. Does that cover everything? Or perhaps Councillor Scott, would you like a further question?
Yeah, Giles, thanks for this explanation. And I was one that asked the question. So being not part of audit and risk and having been part of audit and risk previous council, we obviously went through the process that you're dealing with at the moment to try and change, I guess. And so my question around that, in terms of the risk mapping, is there a distinction between risk in terms of the organisational risk and governance risk, or do you see those as being the same risk?
I think that's a good question. I think at an academic level, there probably is. I think that in terms of, I would like to support the council to identify a dynamic risk framework that allows them to understand the strategic risks that may impact on the achievement of the council's objectives. At the same time, there will be a number of related organisational or project or portfolio related risks that we should also bear in mind. So for example, cybersecurity is a generic risk that impacts on all organisations. Whether it's directly linked to the achievement of your outcomes, it would be a somewhat interesting topic of conversation, but it's a risk that we should no doubt manage and mitigate.
So just supplementary to that, in terms of, I guess, digging a bit deeper, is this organisation, Environment Canterbury, is probably leading the field in a lot of things in terms of their statutory management across the region. And I'm quite interested in the fact that sometimes I think we get too far ahead of the rest of the country and spend a lot of money doing things that the rest of the country hasn't caught up with. And I was just wondering whether those are the things that you take into account when you're looking at the organisation. I mean, because you understand through the tier twos and through the chief executive in terms of the direction, more about the specific tactical and operational direction this place is taking. We look at strategic stuff, and between what we think and what's actually happening, there is some risk there in terms of us trying to get too far ahead of ourselves. I was just wondering whether we actually take that into account in terms of our risk profile.
From my perspective, that starts to encourage us to have a conversation around risk appetite. Is what is the council's appetite for taking on risk in a number of areas, including innovation in terms of delivering and exploring new ways of doing things that, to the councillor's comment, may be slightly ahead of the rest of the country, trying to lead the country. But it would also apply to the risk appetite in relation to cybersecurity or borrowing or risks with the levels of reserves, things that we have started to talk about. And risk appetite is not something, again, that's static, but it's also not a single risk appetite because of the activities of the council are many and varied. One of the things that we will be looking to put in place over the coming months is assurance that we are statutorily compliant. So do we comply with the legislation that we operate under, to confirm that and to strengthen assurance in that respect. And that starts to lead into where is the council interested in innovating and has a risk appetite for innovating in all sorts of activities.
Right, that's really good. Thank you. That's good. Thank you very much, Giles. Thank you for coming to the table. That's all good. Now, what we're doing next, everybody, is that under the standing orders, I'm able to vary the order of the business, and on recommendation, I'm going to move to page 166 of item 10 on the agenda before we go into the public excluded. So this is public excluded business to be transferred into the open. I will speak to it. This is a new process that we've been using to get the business out of the public excluded in public, so everybody knows what we're doing. First of all, the appointment of this Canterbury Civil Defence Management Controller Regional Manager, and who we appointed, and we did it in public excluded. And then we receive information about the Laurie and Wilson building and the Odeon Theatre. You'll see the details of that on page 167, what we're releasing there. So I'll look for a mover of those two together. Moved by Councillor John Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Ed. You can do that. They're both moved. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? No, there's been nobody against. That's carried. Thank you very much. That just makes it really clear now that we've got that on there, that's what we're doing. So now we're just going back, and I'm going to move a resolution that we are moving into public excluded to deal with a number of issues, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Other business, item 11, I don't know that there is. Number 12, there's no notices of motions. Number 13, next meeting, 9 November, no, December. Cool, at least I get the month right, 9 December. Questions? No questions on notice that I've received. Who would like to do the closing? Liz, over to you.
Ko whakairia te karakia. Takina te karakia. Ka whakairia te kōrero ki te tahu o te tātou whare. Kia tikina anō, a tonoa, a tonoahi. Homie, hui.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everybody. Good effort. Thank you to the staff for being here.